no. Member for Bunbury.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak to the Premier's statement of February 2018. And it's been a long time since February 2018, and all I can say is what a wonderful year. Absolutely fantastic. This is very much a bit of a hindsight commentary rather than the response to Premier statements usually being at the beginning of the year. But it is a delightful point in the year to actually be able to stand up and speak not only about the agenda that the Premier set out, but how we've tracked down through 2018. Now, in February 2018, of course, the Premier set out the government's agenda for the year. It was clear, it was simple, and it was unambiguous. An agenda to build confidence in the future of the state, an agenda for growing jobs, to provide certainty for investment, and to create opportunity. A Western Australia where people can find a good job, feel secure, valued in that job, and have faith that their children would experience the same. That is what he said. It's a restatement of what we on this side stand for and the values that drive us. Confidence in the future, confidence in the people of Western Australia, and confidence in the principles of fairness and inclusion. There was something else in the Premier's statement, though, something that it was a small thing, but it made such a significant difference. Something that recognises our collective history as a nation that goes back over thousands of years, and that was the acknowledgement of country. This year, in this place, we started to acknowledge country at the commencement of each day, and that makes a difference. Sometimes the small things we do make a big difference. At this year's Reconciliation March in Bunbury, I told members of the Noongar community who live in my electorate of this acknowledgement and the respect for culture and for people that sits behind that acknowledgement. And we often forget that acknowledgement of country is about showing respect for traditional knowledge held by elders and passed on to each generation. For people travelling through country, it was the start of a conversation about what to watch out for, what is safe, what is not, where water and food might be found, an acknowledgement that's about demonstrating our care for each other, but more importantly, it was also about learning from history and learning from tradition. And that is something that the members on the opposite side often forget, particularly when it comes to our financial position, and I intend to reflect on the opposition's unwillingness to embrace history more fully further on. That is what the Premier did, though, when he acknowledged country, and it wasn't a hard thing to do. Now, we're fortunate that Bunbury is host to the Noongar Language Centre and employs 2 out of the 5 Aboriginal linguists who are working nationally to preserve language. They've worked to build a vocabulary in our region that covers 200 years of recent language and are linking language and culture. And I can't emphasise, from my point of view, how important that is. And I know that the member for the Kimberley, who is in the chamber today, would absolutely endorse those views from a Kimberley perspective. The Language Centre has built a network of global linguists specialising in Indigenous language revival, and with it a new sense of pride in heritage and a connection to culture. And we often forget, in terms of our interpretation of culture, the culture that exists from traditional Aboriginal people and from traditional Aboriginal communities. The language centres are taking a message out that culture is more than important, that it defines who we are, and the language centres are making a difference. Now, I make these points because in talking about the progress and growth of our state and of my own electorate of Bunbury as a regional city, we cannot do this unless we recognise and include the people who were here before us and embrace people on their terms in a respectful manner. We need to build our future based on fairness, inclusiveness and mutual respect. People are at the core of the work of this place, and in the rush of blood that is politics, we shouldn't forget that. Inclusion, fairness, opportunity. These are important values that are front and centre in the Premier's statement. So replying to the Premier's statement at the end of the year has the benefit of hindsight, and it's more like a report card than a sharing of vision. And what a year it has been. The economy is improving. As the Treasurer said recently, unemployment is down from 6.3% when the government was elected to 5.7%. Full-time employment is rapidly increasing. The domestic economy has expanded by 1.1%, and we're in a growth period. And alongside the significant improvement in the state's economy, there are the state's finances. The forecast operating deficit is significantly reduced, and expenses growth is on a planned trajectory to recovery. The government has successfully built a relationship with the Commonwealth on the GST and top-up infrastructure payments, and I note that the electorate of Bunbury, as well as my colleagues in the member for Murray-Wellington and the member for Collie-Preston, are set to benefit from some of that with the construction of the Outer Ring Road. Expenses controlled, revenue base increasing. It's a pretty simple formula. At a broader level, economic indicators show a gradual return of confidence in the state. Average annual state demand is back in positive territory, business investment is improving, and I can't help but recall the Chamber of Commerce and Industry with their magazine with a big picture of the Treasurer and the budget saying, "The budget we love." Job vacancies are on the increase, and there's levels of optimism that things are at last changing in the retail sector. In the Southwest, Bankwest economist Alan Langford has been upbeat about the future of the region's economy, the Southwest region that is, noting the Southwest economy is steadily gathering momentum, as among other factors that all too often downplayed, the importance of the production phase of the resources boom becomes more apparent, accompanied by the weak, aided by and abetted by a competitive Australian dollar. Wherever you look, there is evidence of an energetic and enthusiastic government that is getting on with the job of following through on our commitments. Whether it is legislation reforming important areas of law, such as redress for victims of institutional child sexual abuse, strata titles reform, local government reform, even taxi reform, and more recently the really difficult challenges associated with the discussion and the introduction of legislation around assisted dying, and the debate that we've had more recently around fracking and the commitment that this government has made in terms of finding a pathway through a difficult community issue, a pathway that is sensible, fair, and balances the needs, as far as it's possible to do so, of varying interests in the community. In the last month, the government had delivered final state approvals for the Albemarle project, something that the member for Murray-Wellington and I are both very pleased about. And subject to federal approval and final sign-off by the Albemarle board, this project will signal a new wave of manufacturing for Bunbury and the Southwest. And I have to say that this has been one of the fastest approvals processes that I've seen in my 30-odd years in the state public sector prior to coming into this place. And it was a commitment to meeting the needs of the market, meeting the needs of the potential opportunity, but without compromising the approvals process in itself. Now, Albemarle is a company with a long history extending back to 1887. Starting out as a paper manufacturer, it diversified into fuel additives and then specialty chemicals. It's a company with a long heritage and a great tradition. It is highly adaptable to new market opportunities and new technologies, and it has a passionate and strong value base that embraces notions of care, notions of courage, notions of curiosity, of humility, of collaboration, and integrity and transparency. Those are important values, and we welcome companies with those sort of value frameworks into our region, and I'm sure that this is going to make a significant and positive difference to not only the Southwest, but to the state of Western Australia. On construction, Albemarle's plant at Kemerton will be the largest lithium hydroxide plant globally, and this government has a vision to build on that through creating a task force to explore and research the opportunities for further manufacturing associated with battery technologies and electricity storage. Not only is Bunbury the state's second city, but it will be the epicentre of lithium and its contribution to energy storage technology. And while this is going on, the government, in partnership with the community, business and unions, is examining opportunities for broader manufacturing in the Bunbury area, opportunities that could include major metal fabrication for both import replacement in the resource sector and specialist fabrication for export. What an exciting government to be a member of. Absolutely stunning. The future opportunity of the Bunbury port is under the microscope through the Westport Task Force, again repositioning my electorate at the centre of its maritime heritage and creating new opportunities for exploration for the port. And all of this means jobs, it means apprenticeships, it means traineeships, and it means opportunity. Now, my electorate is a relatively small electorate in geographic terms, covering some 60 square kilometres. It has one of the larger regional populations with a strong multicultural flavour. It sits at the head of a southwest economy with a gross state product or gross regional product estimated at over $15 billion, based on agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, resource processing, human services and the creative industries, a shining light for our region. It is host to the region's port, which has grown every year in terms of freight handled and is central to the large industrial land resource capable of supporting the opportunities I've described. So we started out with a plan for Bunbury that set out how we would support the emergence of a modern 21st century city with a strong sense of the future and the contribution it could make to Western Australia. And there's a healthy conversation in Bunbury about how we achieve this, how we create a place where people can enjoy a career, build a home, educate the kids, have a healthy lifestyle, and have all of this in a place that you love. And I'm sure that those sorts of principles are shared by many members in this place for their own electorates. And while we're doing all of that in Bunbury, we're working through not only what is important for the city of today, but what will also be important for the city in 10, 20 or 30 years. What is all the more remarkable is that we're doing this despite the legacy of the previous government, achieving this with the state finances under control and our commitment to reduction of state debt firmly in place. Now, I noted the member for Churchland's comments on the 31st of October that we should ignore the past, that the only view of transparency and accountability is in the present. And with a legacy of $40,000 million, I can understand why the opposition wants to forget the past. Don't look there, let's just look at the current status and move forward from today. But we as a government can't afford to neglect the past, because that is the legacy that we are having to deal with, and it guides the principles of sound budget strategy and sound budget management. If we do not learn from the past, we cannot build a future. So I hope that the members opposite, at some point far down the track where they might be in charge of the budget papers again, bear that in mind in terms of managing expense growth and managing expenditure, because we are certainly building a legacy for the future. So while this government is forging ahead with fundamental reform and generation of opportunity, we will repair that legacy left by the previous government. I'm excited by this government's work in my electorate, the work about to commence on improving sporting facilities at Hay Park, improving facilities for the Dalyellop Surf Lifesaving Club. It's relatively small projects, but fundamentally important to the many volunteers who work with those facilities week in, week out. Identifying and supporting the needs of young families in Dalyellop, a community of 7,500 people, larger than many other country towns. The work proceeding on stage 2 of the Bunbury waterfront, new investment in Bunbury and Newtonmore senior high schools, the redevelopment of the Bunbury Dolphin Discovery Centre, a stunning building which is going to be a new landmark for the city of Bunbury, and a new centre for tourism, both domestic and international. Support for the retail sector in Bunbury's CBD, and last week I had the real joy of actually launching a new website based on collaborative marketing principles for the retailers in the CBD, who have come together as one to promote the benefits and the interest of shopping in the city centre. Work's underway to replace the Australind train, new facilities to support people suffering from mental illness, the government's work under the Meth Action Plan, and it was great to see the report of the Meth Task Force released this week, and the support that we're putting into the suburban areas. And fundamentally, the work on the Outer Ring Road has now commenced through a planning stage, providing certainty of long-term access to the port as it becomes more and more of a freight logistics centre, providing a direction for southbound traffic so that we can focus on the needs of Bunbury, and the needs of Bunbury, importantly, as a destination. And then, of course, we have the famous Kambana footbridge that's adjacent to Kambana Bay, which I think is a special attraction for Bunbury. And I know that this activity is not just restricted to my electorate, but across WA, the Minister for Regional Development has been very active together with local members, looking at new opportunities for agriculture, tourism and manufacturing. Now, this government is bringing a fresh approach to regional development with a new focus on regional strategy and sustainability. It's about a commitment to regional infrastructure, and we have one of the largest regional road building programs in history, and regional opportunity, building on the strengths of each region. I contrast this with the tension that existed between members from the National Party and the Liberals in the previous government. Each year, the Nationals were acutely aware of spending the cap, the royalties for regions cap, or risking loss of R4R funds. The Liberals equally knew that not meeting the spending cap meant less commitment to the R4R fund in any given year and more opportunity to deal with wider issues of state. As a consequence, and as the Langelant report showed, good business planning and management was a casualty. We are not going to build the future of our regions on a buy now, pay later basis. We will build a future based on wise investment, and that is why I'm proud to be part of a McGowan